Hello, welcome to another tonalist landscape oil painting demonstration. This is your painter in residence, M. Francis McCarthy, and the painting I'm bringing you today is a study after Camille Corot called Shipyard in Honfleur. Pretty sure that's the title, might be wrong. I dragged it into old Yandex, which has a really good image search, especially since Google's has got kind of weird. Yeah. We are painting on a textured board, which has been prepared with some black gesso and a texturizing process. You can, if you type the word texture into the search button in my channel, you'll see how to do that. Also, the recipe is in my book, which you're going to see an ad for in about, I don't know, 6-7 minutes. And yeah, I don't paint on the texture. I went through a big phase with the texture. Everything I did for probably 2.5 years, I was on a textured board. But so I texturized the board with the black gesso, and in this case, I went over it with some oil paint that was kind of a neutrally brownish tone, which ended up being the perfect color for the Corot study. And yeah, notice that I'm not saying riffing on Corot. I played it straight. I thought about replacing his sky because his sky was nothing to write home to mom about, but it did the job, and it was, you know, beautiful, and I felt like just playing it straight. So very interestingly, this palette in this painting is quite limited. I mean, we're using a lot of well, let's just go through the colors we're using. The drawing that I'm doing now, drawing such underpainting, that is burn umber with some perylene black to kind of compensate a little bit for the redness, because I didn't want to go too red. Other colors I used would have been white, of course, some black, yellow ochre, raw umber. I really leaned on the brown ochre quite heavily on this one. Burnt umber, burnt sienna was just a minor player. And I did use a very small amount of Mike's green because there wasn't a lot of green in it. It's practically a sepia painting. That's just how he was rocking and rolling, I guess. But I enjoyed doing it. I don't enjoy doing little fiddly figures and boats and things, but you know, I sucked it up and I got it done. And there you go. We have a nice study of Corot. If you're not familiar with Camille Corot, he was, I'm not going to get into his Wikipedia entry, but he was probably the preeminent Barbizon painter. Barbizon, you know, at the beginning when I say your tonalist landscape oil painting demonstration, tonalism really got its start in the Barbizon movement that was popular in France, say from, I'm going to go 1840, 50 to right up until the Impressionist era. Camille Corot was probably the most popular painter in this school. Other artists would have been Rousseau, forget his first name, Daubigny, and Dupré. I'm a big fan of all of those guys. Done a few studies. I wouldn't class Dupré in Corot's league, although I certainly do like making. That's a guy I like riffing off of because a lot of those compositions are interesting, but I don't feel like playing it real straight. You know, we played it pretty straight here. And so Camille's big innovation, a lot of you might know this already, but we're getting new folks all the time. And he was Corot was definitely influenced by Constable, you know, preeminent landscape painter in England. But he took things in his own direction, which was a lot more atmosphere, a lot more looseness, and brush fracture. His earlier work was definitely tighter, you know, but this period here looks like mid-period Corot to me. One of the things he was very good at was his edges of his trees over a sky, and that really is probably the greatest challenge in the actual activity of painting. I would say the greatest challenge in painting on its own is composition. So of course it's not a factor when you're doing a study after a master. He arrived at this effect of getting air into his trees through lots of small strokes, and I do my impression of that. You'll see I do a lot of strokes a bit later on in the painting, so stay tuned for that. And it almost gets like almost a Van Gogh-ish type of approach, since I leave the strokes sort of raw. Now when you're laying in lots of strokes in a strokey way, you know, if you're doing the Van Gogh thing, you're just leaving them lay there, you know, and there's a bit of contrast with lighter strokes over darker, etc. You know, you can work those in, blend those in, and that's something I definitely do a bit of that. I don't like to get things too Van Gogh-y, if I can. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. Anyway, if you see his original, which you can do in the members area, you're going to be visiting for a while as I show my color mixing session and whatnot. You'll see it feels like it's more yellow, and we'll talk about that after the ad for my book, which is coming up. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and boom, my book. If you dig what I do, you dig tonalism. There ain't no other book teaching you tonalism, just mine. Maybe someone else will come along. I'm not saying I'm the all-time master of tonalism or anything, but I've been working at it, and since I come across it, I had to teach myself. I had no every book I came across was some form of impressionism. And it's interesting, actually, talking about Corot. Some people would call him the father of impressionism because he's the first one to kind of loosen things up, get some looser brush strokes going, some nice atmosphere going. You know, he would do the little figures, and I think his use of the little figures was a big influence on George Ness. We got a little figure in the boat there, and yeah, I just did my best with it. I don't really like I don't like little areas in paintings where I have to tighten up and get things right. I just like to jam my way through the whole thing, you know. For the most part, that's what I did. I had to pay attention on the boat and the figure, but it didn't slow me down too much. Like I said, in members area, this I didn't say, but this video is about 2 hours 45, including the color mixing sessions, and I was doing an initial session where I talk about where I think the problem areas are as we are looking at the reference. Every video starts out like that. So of course I don't really like to pop the reference up in these 15-minute videos because I don't even like sharing the reference. I only do it for members because they are contributing, and I feel it's good for their education. So they're actually parting with some of their hard-earned dosh, so I try to give them as much edumacating as I can. Anyway, we were talking about so there was a more yellow feel, which I could get it so easily just with a thin glaze, and I used to do that in the old days. But you know, the fact of the matter is that the particular type of titanium white I'm using will have a tendency to yellow a bit with time anyway, so we'll just let it yellow and mellow on its own. I don't really like to install that sort of tobacco stain feeling anymore. I do set out to make a faithful you know, version of when I'm doing a straight up study, but more like with the attitude of the fresh color that the painter would have been going for when the painting was brand new. He didn't set out to make things extra yellow. Things got yellow over time. And that could be varnish. It could be, like I said, some of the... I was going to order some titanium white the other day, and she was like, oh, do you want the one with the walnut oil? And I'm like, no, the linseed oil one's fine. I'm like, what's the difference? She's like, oh, well, or maybe it's safflower oil. Don't quote me. She's like, well, the one with the walnut or the safflower oil won't yellow. And I'm like, I don't care. You know, a little yellowing's going to be fine as it mellows into its old age. And So, talking a little bit about Corot, what a master of composition he was. And you can look at the design and the stuff. I mean, you're looking at my version of his thing, but I have to say his trees were cooler than mine, but I did a good job. He was probably working a heck of a lot bigger too. And the thing is, like, oh, let's talk about this. I've talked about it before, but like I said, you may be new. I recommend if you're a painter and you want to get better painting that you go after some studies of people you like, and not really me, but you can if you want. It's allowed, you just put attribution on the back of your study, painted after M. Francis McCarthy, and we are good to go. But really, go for the masters, and when you do, just give it a good shot without being all tight. Don't think you gotta paint everything exactly. Do your best, but don't get too tight, because what'll happen is it'll be stiff and ugly, and it's basically going after it in the first place that gives you all the teaching and all the learning, I think, sweating all those little details. And the same thing goes, of course, I've talked about that with the photo reference as well. Probably the last one, I mention it all the time. I'm always repeating myself, but this temptation to think, oh, I'm going to bring over this detail from the reference, and this detail from the reference, and this from the reference, and next thing you know, it's just an ugly, bad painting, and you may have so much time and effort invested in it that you're not even aware of how bad it is initially. You might be very proud. Move through the whole painting process in a calm and confident manner. That's my best advice to you. Do your best, but do your best to make an expressive statement, even if you're making a study after someone else's painting, because that's what we want. That's what the world really needs, is your human expression, and no one else can paint like you. Okay, you may be doing studies after masters, but I guarantee you, if you go after this particular painting by Corot, your version won't look much like mine. Mine has a decent resemblance to Corot's, but it also very much looks like one of my paintings as well. And that's another thing. We're going to talk about that before we wrap up the video. That's style. And I have touched on this subject on the channel, but I came up the other day with they weren't a student. They were somebody maybe potentially that would be a student. Came into my studio, and I want to know what my style is. I want to get my style. It's like I've heard it so many times, and I'm like, I always say the same thing. Like, style, your personal style should be something you can't escape, something you can't avoid, not something contrived. Like, oh, this is how I do it. I put my back behind my head and I use the brush that way. That's my style. That's just not. That's not mastery. That's not how style really should work. Style's something that you can't escape it, because everything you do is a total reflection of you. No one else can paint like you. No one else ever will. And we have these ideas about these people that did forgeries and things. The fact of the matter is, they weren't trying to forge a painting that was already well known and well photographed. They were doing forgeries in the style of, right, and then signing them with that artist. In other words, they would be an undiscovered work by that master. That's how you do forgeries. You don't do forgeries by painting because you're never going to hit every stroke exactly right. It isn't. Maybe it's possible. It certainly would be possible for someone with a bit of a different personality than mine. I could never do it. I couldn't even do a good forgery of my own work. I could do, and I do all the time, go after the same scene repeatedly, but each one is radically different, and that's for one reason why I don't think it's a problem at all to do that. If you bought my version of a scene and I paint it again, completely different painting, usually different size as well. It's very rare that I'll do the same thing the same size, and it definitely will change things big and little ways. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Do me, thank you for coming around. If you have a little the time, leave me a comment. I really appreciate that. Really like it. Or if you are financially stable, send me some money. Anyway, until I come back with another video for your edification and enjoyment, do me a favor, do me a solid, take good care of all your loved ones. Take good care of yourself. Stay out of trouble, and God bless you and your family.